Hey everyone, my name is Dillon Gonzalez. I'm the editorial director of GeekVibesNation.com and also a co-host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast. And welcome to a brand new episode of No Streaming Required, your weekly deep dive into all the latest and greatest in the world of physical media. It's that time again. It is a very special installment of Exploring the Warner Archive. It is that time where we dive deep into the new releases coming from the Warner Archive, but also get into some of the older releases I feel may have been overlooked, that maybe needs another spotlight on them, because the Warner Archive has been around for a long time, and they've always put out quality work, and there's just some titles that have probably slipped by your radar. And in addition to that, there's some non-Warner Archive Warner titles that I'm going to be spotlighting in this episode that I know people are going to be very excited about. But I'm just going to jump right in to actually my only new Warner Archive title for this month. And that is Tom and Jerry, the Cinemascope Collection. The complete Cinemascope Collection. Now, this is the only Warner Archive release for February because the LA fires kind of put things a little bit behind at the Warner Archive, so things got delayed till March. So this is actually the only new one for this particular episode, but it's a good one. I know it's one that a lot of fans have been really clamoring for because Tom and Jerry's had a very erratic history on Blu-ray. There was supposed to be a second volume after the initial Golden Collection, like over a decade ago. I recently, as of last year, I reviewed the first volume that Warner Archive re-released that Warner Home Video put out. There's supposed to be a second volume. It got canceled due to some problematic shorts that were on the collection. They were going to be included in the collection that some of the higher-ups didn't approve of, and it's all kinds of lore around this. That's generally what is known to be what happened. So we've seen Tom and Jerry shorts sprinkled throughout a lot of the new releases over the last few years, but it's really cool to finally get a new Tom and Jerry Blu-ray, and this specifically focuses on the time a little bit later into their run, where people were kind of being not as enticed by the theatrical experience as they once were. They were able to see a lot television at home, so the people behind Tom and Jerry, they decided to try to lure people back to the theater by providing them something that they couldn't see at home, and that was in a nice Cinemascope presentation, so like a fancy widescreen presentation, it's like in layman's terms. So these are all those shorts. There's 23 shorts that were completed during that time, along with 3 additional bonus shorts that weren't in part of the Cinemascope phase, but there were cool additions to that. But yes, people generally believe that the earlier runs of Tom and Jerry were the best, and yes, that is true, but there's still a lot of really good gems in the Cinemascope collection, and seeing them in this kind of widescreen format, it does make the animation stand out a little bit more. I really enjoyed this collection. I don't think I need to explain Tom and Jerry to anyone, but the classic duo, they are in great form in this collection. There's a lot of classics that I really enjoyed, and it's just always such a treat. It makes me feel like a kid again to watch these short films. And this Blu-ray collection, they do a really nice job with this. These come from masters that were created in the 2010s, but since that time, they have had additional work and remastering done by the Warner Archive team to make these look as good as possible, compared to a lot of the animation that I've talked about in some of my previous episodes. There was a phase where Warner Brothers proper were restoring like a lot of their Looney Tunes and other animated titles to be put on Max. So that allowed for a lot of DNR to kind of lessen some of the film grain that should have been on some of these shorts and stuff. And I've talked about this on previous videos. This is not as much of an issue with this. This actually looks very organic a lot of the times, very bold colors. This is actually what we want our animation to look like for the most part. There's a few moments here and there where you may suspect a little bit of DNR has been applied, but overall, This is a really fetching looking presentation. There are a few shorts near the beginning that are in their original stereo soundtrack. But then I think the studios kind of thought it wasn't cost efficient, so they went back to the mono, which the rest of the collection is presented in. But this proves that Warner Archive really had fans in mind. They try to give everything in their correct aspect ratio. They try to make everything look very natural and film-like. They try to give the right audio presentations for all these. And you got a trio of additional shorts in addition to the 23 shorts, the Cinemascope shorts. So if you're a Tom and Jerry fan, get this. It's really great. I think it will only, if there's support for this release, I think it will only provide additional ammunition for the Warner Archive team to convince the higher-ups that we want more Tom and Jerry on Blu-ray, and maybe some of those shorts that maybe were a little bit controversial like a decade ago, maybe they can be re-released, maybe with the proper warning for adult collectors, not to like the sensitivities and all cultural sensitivities and all that stuff. But we just want all of this on Blu-ray in the best quality possible, which is what they have done for the Cinemascope collection. So fans, make sure to pick this up and support this. If you're a Tom and Jerry fan, it's definitely worth a place in your collection. Now I'm going back to some older titles that I think should be on your radar for one reason or another. Something that I was very excited to catch up on. I've had it on my wish list for a long time. This is a 2017 release that they did of Vision Quest. This is just a nice 80s gem of just Matthew Modine as a high school wrestler who has decided to try to, like, in his this particular school year, try to cut weight to get down to a particular weight class so he can face this guy who's pretty much known like as undefeated, and he just kind of has this drive about him. And the only thing kind of keeping him from this singular focus, where he's kind of pushing himself beyond the limits that he really should be, is the presence of this mysterious drifter who kind of enters his life. And I won't go through the narrative, but she ends up staying at his house for reasons. And they kind of get close, but she's kind of like an older woman and kind of just like very mysterious, like I said, and just very cool. And he falls in love with her just pretty much immediately. And it's just him trying to find out, trying to find inside him if he has, what he should be focusing on, whether or not he has what it takes to make this weight class, face off against this undefeated wrestler, or whether or not he's going to let his heart take over, whether or not she's even interested in him, just basically figure out his life in just like classic high school fashion. And if you're a fan of sports dramas, I think you will appreciate this. Like, wrestling has not been depicted a ton on film, but whenever it is, I think it's always very interesting. And this is just like a perfectly entertaining movie. If you're a Madonna fan, she has has her first appearance on film here. She sings a couple songs in a bar, so that's cool. And yeah, if you just kind of like that flavor of film of like 80s kind of, a little bit cheesy at times, but just like generally warm and fulfilling, I think you'll like Vision Quest. I enjoyed it. And this, from being from 2017, it was from a 2K scan of the Inner Positive. It looks very nice. Nice, well-resolved film grain. Everything, all the colors look nice. Sounds good in DTS 2.0. In terms of special features, there's 2 trailers, one red band and one of the theatrical green band trailer. Nothing else, but if you're a fan of this genre, sports movies, 80s movies, Vision Quest, worth picking up. Fast forwarding to a 2019 release, we have Paul Newman in The Prize. Now, this is a pretty decent one. It kind of feels like almost like a Alfred Hitchcock cast-off. It's not Alfred Hitchcock, but you do have Paul Newman it's directed by Mark Robson. You have Paul Newman as a writer who gets invited to be part of the Nobel ceremony in Switzerland, and he doesn't really take things seriously. He's kind of like a lush, and he's kind of always just kind of very aloof, But once he gets there, he starts kind of noticing things like at the ceremony, and he really suspects that one of the recipients, played by Edward G. Robinson, is not who he says he is. So he kind of starts digging into this a little bit and kind of getting out of his drunken stupor to really start to dig into things. And he kind of starts to uncover a conspiracy that links back to like Cold War issues and all kinds of stuff. So it's really like Paul Newman getting himself in over his head, just kind of finding himself in the middle of this conspiracy and just trying to unravel what is going on. It's not the best kind of thriller in this vein, but if you like a general kind of like spy mystery thriller, it's decent entertainment. If you like Paul Newman, he does a very good job. You could really picture this being like a role that maybe like Cary Grant would have taken, like in the vein of like North by Northwest. But overall, I was entertained. Not the best movie I'm talking about today, but still perfectly solid, perfectly entertaining. If it sounds interesting to you at all. I'm not exactly sure of the source of this transfer. I believe it is most likely a 2K scan of the interpositive. That's not confirmed. To what I can say, it looks fantastic. Really nice, considerate transfer. Nice bold colors. No damage. Everything's like looks nice and consistent with great resolved grain, all that good stuff. 2.0 soundtrack sounds really good, solid, and a trailer in terms of special features. But if you are a Paul Newman fan, check out The Prize. Going further back into their output, we go back all the way to 2013, 12 years ago. We have one of their early releases of Billy Rose's Jumbo. This is a circus drama starring Doris Day and Jimmy Durante, Martha Ray, Stephen Boyd. It's a little bit of a musical, but a circus comedy. Doris Day and Jimmy Durante play father and daughter who run this circus, and throughout they kind of are not on the like kind of falling on hard times as of late. They can't really keep people paid. There's people kind of like abandoning the circus because they're not getting paid, but they're doing their best. Their family, all that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, there is a rival faction who they are trying to gain ownership of this circus and really take over for themselves. And through that, they send one of their sons who kind of infiltrates the circus, but ends up falling in love with Doris Day and kind of falling in love with the circus and not really wanting to help his father take over this circus. That's a general conceit. If that sounds interesting to you, it pulls it off very well. You got a really cute elephant. You got circus entertainment. You got a few musical numbers. Doris Day being very clever and funny and charming. I love Doris Day. I've covered a lot of her work over the past year or so. But she's fantastic. And it's just like a perfectly solid circus comedy. And this... once again, I'm not really sure of the source of this transfer. This was one of their earlier efforts. And you will notice if you stick with Warner Archive that as you get more to modern times, especially the 2020s, that's when they are probably most at their height of their game. But even earlier on, they were really smoking the competition in terms of at least the Warner Brothers proper. They were always putting more care into their transfers. Always at a higher bit rate, usually around 30 or more megabytes. And yeah, it's a not perfect, but for 2013 being one of their first releases, this is a really, really impressive release, and I don't think you will be disappointed. There's so many bold colors in this circus atmosphere, no major damage. I wasn't disappointed in the slightest, and I don't think you will be either if you check it out. In terms of audio, you do get a DTS 5.1 soundtrack. So that sounds really great, very full and lush and stuff. You'll notice I'm talking about several musicals this episode, and a lot of these musicals, they do implement a 5.1 soundtrack that's been kind of upscaled from a 4-track stereo track into a 5.1 container. In terms of this release, you do get 2 short films and a trailer. So Doris Day fans, circus comedy fans, Billy Rose's Jumbo, worth a watch for sure. I was charmed by it. Keeping things pretty lighthearted still, we are going over to a 2018 release of Designing Woman with Gregory Peck and Lauren Bacall and Dolores Gray, who I'll talk about here in a second. But Peck and Bacall, they play a pair who, he's a writer, she's a fashion designer who works in theater. They end up crossing each other's paths on a train, end up falling in love, getting married, and once they get married, they realize that maybe they don't have as much in common as they thought they were. They were kind of swept up in the romance of everything, the whirlwind nature of things. They get married, they're like, our lives are kind of totally at odds with one another. And then there's all kinds of, in addition to this, and them trying to figure each other out and how they kind of can gel together, there's also kind of subplots with like Gregory Peck writing a story about someone who really like a kind of like a mobster type gangster figure who does not want to be written about, and there's also some kind of like jealousy with an old flame and everything, played by Dolores Gray. And Dolores Gray actually shows up in another movie I'll be talking about in a couple titles that I'll point out, but Dolores Gray is very funny in this. But Peck and Bacall are the stars, and they are very good together. They have a nice chemistry together. Peck isn't like the best known for comedies, but like if you like his turn in like Roman Holiday, he's definitely good in that. Bacall's a little bit softer than some of her film noir appearances that she's made over the years in this. It's just nice to see them both in these types of roles. It is kind of reminiscent of like Woman of the Year, but if you kind of generally like this genre, I don't think you'll be disappointed. This does come from a 2K scan of the Inner Positive. Looks great, no complaints, great colors, natural film grain, the whole 9 yards, everything looks good. 2.0 audio, sounds great. You do get a 5-minute interview with the costume designer, which it's an archival featurette. It's pretty interesting, and then you get a trailer. This is from director Vincent Minnelli, who this is not the last time you will hear from him either. But if you like kind of like a screwball comedy, Designing Woman, worth checking out. Heading back to another musical, we have one of our classic ones. Back released in 2015 on Blu-ray is 42nd Street. This is a classic stage play, adapted for the screen. Not super star-studded, but it is a classic tale of, it's set in the world of theater, and it involves like a young ingenue getting a break on Broadway, taking over for a kind of a aging starlet who is kind of falling on hard times, and there's all kinds of like clashing between these two personalities and suspicions and all kinds of stuff, but it's all kind of done more lightheartedly, and there is kind of like a understanding between everyone of just like helping one another and camaraderie and everything. So it's not like all about Eve situation or anything like that. Not a lot of backstabbing, but it's just kind of like an interesting story, rise to fame type of story of just like from just like a budding actress to a star and everything. There's not like I said, there's not a ton in the way of stars. You do get Dick Powell, Guy Kibbe, Ned Sparks, Ruby Keeler. So not a lot of the huge names. Dick Powell was the one who stood out the most to me. This was one of his earlier roles. But I did find it to be a very entertaining black and white movie musical. I enjoyed it. And in terms of this release, DTS 2.0 audio, not really sure the video source, but probably, once again, probably a 2K scan from like a master that was around the time of this release. Great black and white photography, grayscale is firm, no wild like fluttering or anything like that in the picture. The grain resolves well, no major damage, everything looks good. This has a fair number of special features, various featurettes, some newsreels, some short films, a really good assemblage that is definitely more loaded than a lot of the discs that I'm talking about today. So if you're a classic movie musical fan, 42nd Street, definitely worth checking out. Sticking on my musical grind for a couple more titles, we are back with Vincent Minnelli for the classic Brigadoon with Gene Kelly and Van Johnson and Sid Charisse. You will hear several of those people in my next title as well. So this is probably my favorite musical that I'm talking about on this episode. I really love the whimsical nature of this. For those who don't know, Brigadoon is the name of a village. It's kind of a magical village that is in the Scottish Highlands that's kind of hidden away from everyone through magical means. It only appears once every 100 years or so. And they just really have no connection to the outside world. It's kind of like a timeless place. Until one day, it just so happens to line up that Gene Kelly and Van Johnson, they are kind of exploring the area. They end up stumbling across Brigadoon, and they, of course, Gene Kelly starts to fall in love with Sid Charisse's character while falling also in love with the village and figuring out its secrets and all kinds of stuff within that. And like I said, I really like kind of the magical nature of this and just kind of like the folklore of everything. It adds like a nice kind of whimsical element to everything that I appreciate and kind of shakes up the genre a little bit for me. Especially since I was watching so many movie musicals over the past few weeks. It's just kind of breaks up the monotony and it's quite entertaining. I love Sid Charisse. Gene Kelly's always in top form. Van Johnson plays like kind of a curmudgeonly addition who's like kind of suspicious of everything that's going on in this village. And there's also some village drama going on as well. But if you like the play, I assume that you would probably like the movie as well. It's very entertaining. It's not overly long at an hour 48 minutes, but the songs are entertaining. Good performances, great cinematography, all that good stuff. Vincent Minnelli knows what he's doing. In terms of this was actually released in 2017 on Blu-ray. It was from a 2K scan of the inner positive. Looks fantastic, no complaints. I'm going to say a lot of this like over and over about these transfers. Warner Archive, they always do a good job, and this is no exception. DTS 5.1 sound, great big sound for a musical. You love it. I love hearing it. It's great. This has some deleted scenes and a trailer. So good to get some deleted material as just see some of the stuff that was cut and then the trailer. So Brigadoon, very much worth checking out if you're a musical fan or a fan just in general of Gene Kelly. Fun title. My final musical title, you'll see a lot of returning names and stuff for It's Always Fair Weather. So once again, Gene Kelly, Sid Charisse, and as I mentioned, old Dolores Gray from Designing Woman is here as well. All together for a movie musical. This one is a little bit different as well. It has it's about some World War II soldiers who return from war, have the best night on the town. They're old buddies, and they have like a vow that they'll be friends forever and stuff, and that they'll meet together in 10 years and they'll still be like thick as thieves. Fast forward 10 years, they come for this reunion. They're all at different points in their lives, and they really can't stand one another. And it's all about them eventually finding themselves back to one another. And it kind of ties into a larger plot about like a radio program or television program that they kind of get roped into. But overall, it's just really about this trio of men and just like them just trying to get back with one another. But Sid Charisse also does play a potential love interest for Gene Kelly once again after Brigadoon. Once again, love Sid Charisse, and all the rest of the cast is great too. It's just a really charming tale. This is from the same creative team that brought you like Singing in the Rain and On the Town. So it's Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen. So while this may not be as great as Singing in the Rain, which is one of the great movies of all time, it's always fair weather, definitely worth a watch. This one was released in 2016 from a 2K scan of the inner positive. Looks fantastic, great, vibrant colors, like yada yada. You know what I'm saying. Looks fantastic. No glaring imperfections. This one also has DTS 5.1 sound. You do get an array of featurettes, shorts, outtakes, trailers. So good array of special features here. And so if you're a musical fan, a lot to pick up on this episode, but definitely make sure to add this one to your wish list. It's always fair weather, but definitely worth checking out. There's glorious Cinemascope cinematography. Now, I wanted to use that lightly World War II movie, like the World War II soldiers, to transition into a slate of war movies that I have, including at first The Naked and the Dead. This is based on a Norman Mailer book, which is kind of notoriously kind of very kind of graphic and gritty and everything. And while they couldn't translate that directly to the screen, especially at this time, this is kind of darker than your average war picture from this era. They really do have a gritty aesthetic to it that is at least still palpable enough for a mainstream audience at this time. You do have like a clashing of like ideologies within kind of the military ranking. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. You do have people kind of abusing soldiers or like craving bloodlust, or just how they the leadership style is constantly clashing with one another between these strong personalities. You have people getting like killed certain and kind of inconspicuously by like some of the insects and stuff that they come across, and all kinds of just like showing the realities of war in a way that's not just like straightforward of just like enemy versus enemy. There's kind of like the elements and kind of the psychological torture, all that kind of stuff is kind of woven into The Naked and the Dead. Not super packed with stars. You have people like Aldo Ray, Jerry Paris, Henry Amargo, Cliff Robertson, Raymond Massey. So a couple of known names, but not like star-studded. But it is quite a good movie. This did come from 2018. It's a 2K scan of the inner positive. It looks really nice, consistent. All the things I say about the rest of them, it's a very good transfer. You do get a trailer as well as a DTS 2.0 audio, so not loaded with special features, just a trailer. But it's a really good audio-visual presentation for The Naked and the Dead, if it sounds interesting to you. Got another wartime picture. In this one, we have None But the Brave by Frank Sinatra. This is his directorial debut. He also has a role in there as well. And this is really fascinating, especially for this time, kind of tackling this material. It's not perfect, but it attempts to humanize like the conflict between like the Americans versus the Japanese. This really gives a perspective to the Japanese soldiers who occupy this island where this American outfit crash lands on. Each of the units, like the Japanese soldiers and the Americans, are cut off from their superiors. So they're both just kind of on this island, and at first there's like an inclination to kind of jump to violence, to kind of go what is kind of ingrained with them based on what is happening within the war and everything. But there soon starts to become like a little bit of common ground through some kind of extraneous circumstances. They kind of start to bond a little bit and understand one another, and really it humanizes both sides. And I think that's really interesting. Like I said, especially at this time, it's not completely novel these days, but especially whenever we were so close to World War II at this time, and kind of the high passions that would run around this subject. I'm really glad that they did attempt to do this story justice, it may not handle it completely like thoughtfully as we reach the conclusion, but I like the attempt to do something different, and overall I did like it. Frank Sinatra does a good job. Clint Walker, Tetsuya Mahashi, and other great performers. So a different take on a war tale, but definitely one worth checking out. This is one that was released in 2019, presumably from a 2K scan. I do not have confirmation of that, but it is a really good looking transfer. 2.0 audio and a trailer, but none but the brave. If you're a Sinatra fan, see how he is behind the camera. He actually does a pretty good job. Very much worth checking out. My final proper Warner Archive title. I have a couple more Warner titles after this, but my final Warner Archive title is from 2018. It is kind of a wartime tale as well. A little bit further back is Billy Budd, directed by Peter Ustinov, also starring him in a co-starring role, and just generally led this classic adaptation, I believe, from Herman Melville. Stars a very young Terrence Stamp as a titular Billy Budd, who is basically like a young man who is conscripted onto a Navy vessel, but the boat he is conscripted from is he is kind of an unknown personality, and he's really just like kind of like a beacon of good. He's kind of like the moral conscience of the boat, and really just seeing how he changes the demeanor of this new vessel he's on. People trying to figure him out, him earning the respect of the crew, him butting heads against a very villainous Robert Ryan, who kind of plays like a weapons master, he's just a complete terror. And just, it's, if you like kind of like an old school Navy drama, this is like in the 1700s, late 1700s. It's very, very interesting. Terrence Stamp is always great to see. It's good to see where he came from. You got Melvin Douglas and, like I said, Robert Ryan, Peter Ustinov. Very entertaining seafaring tale. This does come from a 2K scan of the Fine Grain Master Positive. Really great looking transfer, black and white, looks great. This has a really cool special feature carried over. This has a commentary track with Terrence Stamp, moderated by Steven Soderbergh, who directed him in The Limey, which I've talked about on this channel before. He's also the director of like the George Clooney Ocean's 11, Traffic, so many great movies. Love Steven Soderbergh, so it's cool to hear him on this commentary track with Terrence Stamp. A lot of great anecdotes relayed, because Terrence Stamp actually used to be the roommates with Michael Caine, which he talks about a little bit. So definitely worth checking out that commentary track if you pick up Billy Budd. And as I mentioned, this is a Exploring the Warner Archive episode, but we're still in the Warner families, but branching out from the Warner Archive just for a couple of titles that I think are very noteworthy and I want to make sure to get on your radar as soon as possible. We have Warner's new 4K upgrade of the 2010s cult favorite, The Nice Guys, from Shane Black. You have Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling as private detectives who are trying to basically untangle a conspiracy that involves the adult film industry, a missing girl, the higher reaches of the government. Everything's in here. It's a pretty good neo-noir comedy, and it just has, if you watch any Shane Black movie, it has that particular flavor of like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang or The Long Kiss Goodnight, which I will be talking about in a couple months when it comes to 4K from Arrow Video. But for now, we have The Nice Guys, and it's a really funny movie. I saw it in theaters in its original run. I'd actually not seen it since, so it was really great to revisit it on 4K. As you saw, it only a 4K disc here, but the disc is fantastic. You got a 4K presentation. It's an upscale of the original 2K digital intermediate, upscaled to 4K in Dolby Vision. It looks great. Maybe not like a huge upgrade in detail from the old Blu-ray, which I had, but I had not watched again since that time. But I dug that out. Maybe not a huge, like I said, huge jump in detail, but color-wise, it's nice and refined. You have less in the way of like minor like compression artifacts are on the Blu-ray are not present here. And the Dolby Vision just looks great. And I always find it fascinating. I mentioned it before, but this is a manufactured on demand, pressed manufactured on demand 4K disc. Warner's been doing a weird thing where they've been giving their like these types of movies Dolby Vision, but not their kind of mainline, which I'm going to talk about on the next one. But it does have Dolby Vision, DTS 5.1 sound, despite what some of the packaging says. There's no Dolby Atmos, but DTS 5.1 sound. It's great. You got the previous 2 archival special featurettes. It's like 5 or 6 minutes for 2 different featurettes. Nothing too in-depth. But if you're a fan of this, I think the 4K presentation is definitely the way to watch it. But my final film, I think, will be kind of one of the major releases of the year from Warner Brothers. It is one of their Best Picture winners. It is a classic. It's been in desperate need of an upgrade. And we're talking about the 4K Ultra HD debut of Amadeus from Milos Forman. You got Tom Hulsey here. You got F. Murray Abraham. This just a classic tale of F. Murray Abraham playing Salieri to Tom Hulsey's Mozart. It's a tale of jealousy and potential not kind of fulfilled, never being able to reach the grand heights. Like Salieri is always just kind of in the background, always feeling lesser than Mozart because it's Mozart. And just kind of like him not exactly plotting his downfall, but always kind of rooting for his downfall, and just kind of like, but also kind of being in awe of this amazing artist, and just really not being able to understand where his genius comes from, and just knowing that there's like, it's almost like God is rooting against him. That's what Salieri feels, that just like God is kind of mocking him and just kind of like giving all of his gifts to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And it's a really fascinating movie. There's a reason it won Best Picture. It's terrific. It had been years or decades since I had watched this, way back in the day on DVD. So I was really glad to revisit this, and I know that this was a special release because this is the first time since that original DVD release where you can see the theatrical cut in anything besides standard definition. Previously, you only had the director's cut, which was in this, originally released in this really nice package from Warner Brothers back in the day. So you had like a director's cut Blu-ray, a nice, beautiful packaging, digibook packaging, and a sampler CD soundtrack, special CD compilation of like some of the Mozart tunes. So as you can see here, like this is advertised as theatrical cut, and you only have one disc that only has a theatrical cut. The director's cut is not on this release, which is maybe the only shortcoming of this release, really. But there was no theatrical cut on this release. So if you want everything, you will have to pick up the old Blu-ray release to be able to watch the director's cut in some form. But I think most people generally agree that the theatrical cut is the way to watch this if you're going to, because the director's cut is not technically a director's cut. Milos Forman never approved it. It was kind of taken away from him, and whenever there was going to be a home video release, and they kind of reconstructed it for basically just like promotional purposes. But they did a wild thing whenever they did this back in the early 2000s. They actually used the original camera negative for this director's cut. So they kind of spliced in scenes into the camera negative, which anyone who's familiar with film preservation would know that that is a big no-no. It could pretty much ruin the original camera negative's like stability if we wanted to preserve the original cut of the movie for future purposes, which came to head with this release. This has been a restoration that's been years in the making. They had to go back to the original camera negative, completely reconstruct it, make sure all the extraneous newer material that was added to director's cut was taken out. The theatrical cut was restored to its former glory for people to see. Finally, this is the version that won Best Picture, so audiences wanted to be able to watch it. And there was a lot of things in the director's cut that people argued really lessened the movie. So to only have an HD version of the director's cut for over a decade, almost 2 decades, is just unacceptable. So Warner Brothers and the Saul Zaentz company really did a good job with this theatrical cut. It is not in Dolby Vision, as I alluded to with my last title, but it is in HDR10, newly restored in 4K from the original camera negative. Looks fantastic. It is a huge upgrade from the same material that can be found on the old Blu-ray, but just everything looks better. It is not like the most tack sharp movie just generally. The source of the movie is not, but it looks exactly how it should look, and the colors are deep. There's a lot of shadow in this movie. A lot of just like locations lit by candlelight. So that's when you want really excellent encoding. You want to make sure there's not blacks being crushed, no compression artifacts. Anything of that nature looks great. There's no banding, anything like that. It's a perfectly natural looking transfer. A DTS 5.1 track. It's probably technically DTS 5.0 from what I can tell, in a DTS 5.1 container. But everything sounds great. In terms of special features, you get like a new 25-ish minute retrospective featurette, which has like some virtual interviews with most of the main cast members, like F. Murray Abraham and Tom Hulsey and Christine Ebersol, along with some of the producers, production designers, such like that. Unfortunately, Milos Forman passed away several years ago. But you do get to see him in the archival featurette that is also included, which runs about just over an hour long. There are a couple of special features that weren't carried over. You do not get that CD compilation. You do not, probably most importantly, you do not get the commentary track that was on the director's cut with Milos Forman. That's a big blow. But so there are multiple reasons to pick up the old Blu-ray as well, but the 4K is the ideal way to watch this movie as it was intended to be seen. Fantastic release from Warner Brothers. It could be better in terms of adding like a Blu-ray, the director's cut, and all the special features, just to have everything in one package. That's the only downside to this, because otherwise, just audiovisual wise, it's a fantastic release from Warner Brothers, and you will not be disappointed if you've been waiting for this for years. Like I know my household has. My wife has been asking to watch Amadeus for years, but she knew that a 4K restoration was around the corner, and she finally got to watch it today, and she was very pleased. So Amadeus, thank you, Warner Brothers, for finally getting this back and how it was meant to be seen. And that was my show. I've had fun talking about this. I hope you've had fun watching it. Let me know what titles you were most interested to check out. Make sure to leave those comments. Share this with anyone you think might like any of these. I appreciate all the interactions I've had. I appreciate everyone who decides to come back week after week. I appreciate you so much. I will be back again next week with a very large slate. But until next time, enjoy.